All right. Is everybody warm enough?
Yeah. Yes.
Need some air conditioning in here. So I'm Kevin Elsing. You've probably seen me here 100 times if you've seen me here once. I do own a company here in town. We manage computer systems and networks. What I'm here to talk to you today is about a nonprofit that I'm part of called Street Epistemology International.
Kevin, can you talk up a little bit?
What's that?
Can you talk up a little bit?
Sure. Louder than what I am?
Yeah.
All right. We need to have microphones in here. So, so basically what we do is we're working on trying to get people to have better conversations without arguing and fighting. That's kind of our goal. That's our mission. That's really what we want to do. Let's see here if I can get. All right, we may have to do it the old-fashioned way. There we go. So we did a little bit about me already. And hi, Arlene.
There
you are.
Arlene is my petition wife, by the way. We go out and do petitions together. Isn't that right, Arlene? I'm sure she's blushing right now. Perfect. All right, the truth. Everyone thinks they have it, including us. And we're going to talk a little bit about what truth is today. And, it's the other person who is mistaken. Is that what we like to think all the time? That we're right, the other person's wrong. That's why we tell them what they need to know, right? But truth has some blind spots. So we want to make sure that we're thinking of this for ourselves before we start having these conversations with others. And then that will help us have these conversations better with others because we can help them find their blind spots and think through things. So there's this filtering where, again, we, not just them, right? You're going to see a lot of we and our here today. So we often filter out data that doesn't conform into our beliefs or our values, which may distort our perceptions of reality. So anybody have any idea on something that you maybe had somebody's reality or your own reality where you think it's totally true and somebody else maybe doesn't?
The election.
The election?
There you go.
Okay. Any other things? Could be political, not political, where you've got a claim that you're like, this is where I stand on it and I'm right. Right? So that's something we have to think about because we're filtering all this stuff through our own perceptions. And when we do that, we're blocking out other people and what maybe we're missing their half of the equation, what their understanding is. Doesn't mean they're right, but we just need to realize that we're filtering information just like other people are. So assuming, one of the things that got me into this was really sitting around with groups of people who are totally like-minded and people in the room assuming that the other people are X, Y, and Z, right? It's about as bad to me as I know. When I hear people say, I know, well, if you know, then why aren't you doing it, right? So it's the same kind of concept here. So when we're making assumptions on this stuff, we can't lump everybody into one big category if we don't want them to lump us into one big category, right? So how many people like being lumped into a big category when somebody walks up to you? Do you like it? Not? So Jim, do you like it when somebody walks up to you and says, oh, you're this, and they label you and they say they know everything about you and you've never even talked to them? Does that make you feel good?
Well, it depends on if they're accurate.
Well, if they're accurate, then it's all right. But if they're not, then right.
Yeah.
So same thing is true for other people. If we're going to ask for that courtesy, we should give them that same courtesy. So that's really what that's about. So predicting. We all think we can accurately predict the future based on things that we think are true. It's like, well, we know that X, Y, and Z is going to happen, and that doesn't necessarily always happen that way. Have you ever had a prediction that didn't come true?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Do you think the people on the other side of the aisle, if we're talking pure politics here, have had things that they've made a prediction and it's not true? Right? So we need to work to humanize each other when we're going to have these conversations. And what I'm building up here is just kind of reasons why we want to do street epistemology, which is coming. So right now we're talking more about laying the groundwork here. So memory. So we all have a tendency to rely on our memory, on past events. Our memories are flawed. Every time that we rethink of something, we're actually rewriting that memory. And just because something happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future, right? But we need to be cognizant of that. Make sure that we're looking at that and we're understanding that, and that the people we're talking to, that we realize they have the same memory blind spot, right? So labeling, we often label or criticize things. Again, that's like what I was talking about when we're sitting in a room full of like people, and those darn expletive XYZ label, right? And we lump everybody into that. And do you think that you can have a good conversation with somebody if you are continually sitting in a room of people who are saying evil, bad people, evil, bad people? When we walk into those rooms, how do we even attempt to have an open conversation with them at all? I mean, we really can't. Arlene can. No, you can't.
No, I can't.
Okay. So we really want to make sure that if we don't want to be labeled, let's not assume and label other people. Let's sit down and actually have a conversation with them and stop assuming, because there is common ground out there to be had. So emotionalizing, we tend to let our emotions get in the way of the things we do. It is so easy to have a knee-jerk reaction when you're talking to somebody from the other side of the aisle, or somebody who disagrees with you and they're in the same party even with you. We can get really emotional about these things, and then emotion. How many people think really straight when they get emotional? No hands in the room, right? So if we're approaching these conversations or approaching people and we're highly emotional, we can't have that conversation. So we need to figure out how we can do this and open up some doors so we can actually talk to each other. So exaggerating. We know somebody who exaggerates a lot, who used to be at the top of the ticket, right? So there are some real exaggerating problems, but it's not just one person. We often exaggerate. Is there anybody here who thinks that they never exaggerate on anything? Right? No? Okay. Okay, and unveiling the truth through clarity. So each of these cognitive blind spots can distort our grasp of truth, and ultimately it fosters us to be unhappy, right? Is anybody really happy with what's going on, right? Are we going to get happier if we just degrade the other side, right? I think we've seen at this point already that it's not going to come from the top of anybody and work its way down. We need to take over this situation, be the adults in the room with the other side, train the other side. People who we don't agree with, they're not bad people. They're just different people who think a little bit different. And we need to do what we can do to understand them. And then the goal is if we can teach this to everybody, they will want to do the same and understand us. And I can tell you from conversations I've had sitting in rooms with people of the other party, right? There can be some really inflammatory things that are said. But when we start talking and we have this conversation and repeating back, for instance, what somebody has said, there's a lot of cognitive things that go on when we sit and we blurt something out. If somebody turns around and repeats that back to you in the same way you've said it, or maybe even shifts it a little bit, but not in a way to straw man it, to poke holes in it, but in a way to show true understanding. I'm going to repeat back to you in as good a way as possible. So you go, that's right. That's what I think. That's how I feel. If we can get to that point, that is beneficial. People want to be heard. I have sat a lot of hours down on Phillips Avenue on Saturday morning, setting up my gear, recording and talking to strangers just about what they believe is true or things that they claim are true. And they go, yeah, I can give you 5 minutes. Well, literally it's a half hour, 45 minutes later, and they're still talking, right? They just want to be heard. So, but we're not just going to listen though, too. So truth-driven clarity and happiness. So by recognizing and understanding and correcting these blind spots, not only can we align ourselves with more reality and boost our happiness, we can also guide others to do the same. So I don't think anybody is really happy at all unless they're totally tuned out and ignoring everything. We've got to figure out how to be happy with each other as well. So what's the best way to know what's true? Does anybody have any good ways to know what's true? I know Jim's got a way to know what's true. What do you do to find out if something's true?
Well, I try to verify it.
Yep, so you verify it. So you may use, what kind of sources do you use to verify?
Historical.
Historical is good, yep. Can't all be historical. Some may be modern, current, maybe news outlets. We maybe talk to other people that we know and trust who may be specialists in the field, right? There's all kinds of different ways that we can go through, but which ones of those are the best way and which ones will help us get to know what truth is? And the other thing is, do we really want to know? So we have to have some curiosity in this thing. If we are not curious at all and we hold the truth and everybody else is wrong, we are not going to go in and we're not going to have these conversations. It's not going to be a good faith conversation and we're not going to get anywhere. So we have to really want to know how someone came to their conclusion. We don't have to agree. We just have to try to understand how they got there and have a little bit of empathy with them on how they got there. Doesn't mean we have to believe it, right? But how are we supposed to have a conversation with somebody if we don't have some sort of understanding on where they're coming from? How do we know what things to ask, what questions to ask if we want to be a little bit challenging? So street epistemology is what we're saying is one of these things. I would argue it's probably the best thing, but there are other ways too, I know, to help us have these conversations. And this methodology is something that, after, again, sitting in rooms with like-minded people, othering people, brought me to the conclusion that this isn't the right way, that there's got to be a better way. So I got involved. So what is street epistemology? So street epistemology is a way to collaboratively and respectfully explore the reliability and methods that a person uses to assign weight to their reasons for thinking that something is true. So we can talk about, it's kind of like you see on the pyramid there, the guided metacognition. So it's like having somebody sit with you and helping you think through your thought process without being judgmental, without criticizing, without debating, without arguing, because we really want to understand. Because when we understand, we can start to talk about, well, why do you believe that? And we can examine those reasons why with them. We may be able to think through, Cheryl has one idea and she got there using this thought process. Tom has got to the same idea and used a different thought process, but you both came to the exact same answer. But now if we take that thought process that each one of them used and applied it to something else, a different decision or a different claim or a different outcome, you could come to two totally different answers on something else. So why and how we get there is really important. And that's what we like to explore. And like we were talking about earlier, we want to make sure that in the beginning phases of this, we want to do a lot of rapport building where we sit and just have a good conversation with them. And you'll find yourself starting to listen for claims. It's like, there's a claim. There's something that, would it be, I would love to explore that with you. I'd like to learn more about that. Are you okay having this conversation? So again, the what is kind of like the belief or the claim, and that's like at the top of the chain. Right now, when we have conversations, we listen to what somebody believes or what somebody claims, and we attack it, right? Because you're wrong, I'm right. I don't care so much about what's at the top of the triangle. That's not what's really important. The base of all this comes down to why, what are your reasons for holding that belief? It may be, my parents were conservative all my life, and they showed me what conservatism was, and they brought me to this place. And that might lead me to say, that's really interesting. Is there anything, has there ever been a time when your parents told you something that wasn't true? And get them to just stop and think about that. It doesn't mean that what your parents say, that this is right, so therefore everything is right. We just want them to stop and think about that and go, I've never really thought about that. They told me about the tooth fairy and that wasn't true. Santa Claus, right. They lied to me about Santa Claus all the way through, and now I'm going to just believe this whole cloth without thinking about it, right? And then, and then the how is the method that we use to get to truth. So if this is really more about leaving the belief and what it is, leaving that on the table, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to even fight about it. We don't want to argue about it. We want to talk more about how you got there, the reasons you got there and how you got there, and are those really good reasons to be there? So if we can get in these conversations, if I can talk to somebody and get them to a point where they stop and they have a moment of aporia and they're thinking, and it's quiet for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. So when you're talking with somebody, I'll pick on you. When you're talking to somebody and you ask them a question and it's quiet for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, what do you want to do?
Interject.
You want to interject, right? That's the worst thing we can do. So when we were talking to somebody and we've got them thinking, and we've put that moment of, I've never thought of this, we need to sit back and embrace the quiet. Just relax and let them soak in it. Because they're thinking, that's where the work is happening. A lot of times when I'm having conversations with people on the other side of the aisle and we get to that point, I'll actually intentionally stop the conversation. And I'll say, it's been great talking to you today. I've got another meeting I need to get to. I'd like to pick this up next week if you're okay with that. And leave cordially. because their tendency is they're sitting and they're thinking through it. They're chewing on it. And I don't want it to become a debate. I don't want it to become something we fight about. I want them to be stuck with it. So I've had conversations with people on a Thursday afternoon. We meet back on the next Tuesday, and they're like, dang it, Kevin, every time I talk to you, I'm stuck thinking about something all weekend long. It never, this very rarely happens with anybody else, but with you, it seems to happen all the time, right? And I'm not out there trying to change their mind. I'm out there trying to get them to just think through why they believe what they believe and how they got there. And they'll come to the right decision a lot of times, not all the time, but that's what compromise is. But we need to give them the room and the space and the permission to think about it without being attacked or pushed over on these things. So I've seen it happen. It works. It's not something that comes naturally that you're going to go out and just do this and it's going to be, smooth sailing. But it's something that we can work on to get people to think. So again, the what do you mean by that word, for instance? When somebody says something to you, there can be individual words in that sentence that, like even the word truth, you'd be surprised that some people have a different meaning for the word truth.
What about the word fact?
Fact, yes, that's a great one. It's a fact. Well, that's cool. Let me know what is your definition of fact. I'm curious. I want to make sure that we're on the same playing field, or we're talking about the same thing. And our goal is to not change. Again, I'm not changing anybody's mind. If you tell me, give me your definition of fact.
Data-driven.
Data-driven? Okay, fact is data-driven.
Yeah.
So this point moving forward.
And I have the data.
Yep, and you have the data.
Generally, the person who I'm arguing with doesn't have the data.
Right.
And I could care less.
Right.
I could care less if he was raised by
wolves,
nurturing parents or parents that hit him or
right,
whatever. I don't have the time. I don't have the inclination.
Yep.
Frankly, I just don't give a damn.
Yep. And so we're going to take you and we'll set you outside of the room because you're probably not going to help us make a lot of progress.
Well, no way. I don't know. See,
potentially.
See,
right? There may be some people that you can beat over the head.
Exactly. I am very shocked at you putting me on the outside of this whole room. For some reason, you didn't come and talk to me about my parents and how I was raised. Now you're just putting me against the wall.
Well, this is what I'm
exactly what you're accusing me of doing.
And this is exactly what I would have asked you when you were saying that specific stuff, Jim. You were talking about what I have the facts and they don't have the facts. And I would say, well, very nice. Tell me about how you got to your facts. Like where are you getting your facts from? Because
historical data.
So does that help you with something that's happening today?
Absolutely.
So everything can be solved.
When I hear a fascist talk today, I can point out that fascists in the 1930s were talking the same way.
So have you had a conversation with somebody and said, you are a fascist, you're talking like a fascist, so stop it, and they stop?
Generally not, but I don't usually follow up the conversation. I don't usually.
Right. So the concept of this whole thing is really not, it's a different way to have these conversations. A different way to have an open-minded conversation without fighting about it. Yes.
Yes, but if you ask some people, okay, what's your fact? And they say, oh, I learned my facts from Fox News. Okay, what do you do then?
Yep. Well, so this is where we'll go through, because so now what we're talking about there is how do you know it's true, right? It's not why you know it's true, it's how you know it's true, right? And do they always say true things? is there a chance that they're not true? So there's a difference too between this methodology is probably not going to work on, and this is not a slam on anybody, but like if somebody is a member of a cult, let's say, and they're indoctrinated into a cult, you're probably not going to use this methodology to get somebody who's indoctrinated into a cult out of a cult. So that's a tougher situation. And there may be some individuals who are pushed to one side far enough that they may not be reachable, potentially, right? But again, we can't black and white all this stuff and go, we can't have conversations with these people, period, and walk away. There's more people that have things in common with us than what don't have in common with us. So how did you conclude that what's true? What method did you use for this? And do you think that's a reliable way to come to truth? And that's, again, where we're talking about the method. So basically, there's some basic steps in street epistemology where we want to go into these conversations and think about, in our conversations, what do we want to get out of this? Is our goal to go in and change somebody's mind right now? Do we want to go in and have a better understanding of where they're coming from so we can have the conversation better with them? Do we want to, so that's part of it. We want to establish rapport and informed consent. So are you okay having this conversation? Because some people in conversations, they don't want to talk about it. And if they don't want to talk about it, what is the sense of us pushing them and pushing them into an argument, into a fight? That's going to lead us to just all be miserable. And then we're not going to be able to sit down at our family gathering, right? We got people disowning their parents, right? These things are not healthy. So so identify a claim, and that can be something that we're just talking to somebody and something comes up and it's just like, that's interesting. I'd like to explore that with you. Are you good with that? I'd love to do that. Identifying a confidence level. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll say, you know, on a scale of 0 to 100, how confident are you that that's true? You know, if they say, man, I'm 90% confident. Well, what could you learn? Is there anything you could learn that would bring you down to 89, 88, right? To get them to stop and think, well, what type of thing could I learn that could actually lower my confidence? If somebody's at 100 and there's like, well, there's absolutely nothing that I could learn because I am totally right. Well, is that the best position to be in? Is that an open-minded position to be in? If we're 100% right, or if they think they're 100% right, or we think we're 100% right, I think there's got to be a little room. Yes.
I was just going to say, I think that the Fox thing is so a good question and a good thing to say, but couldn't we say, I don't know, I'm just throwing this out. Couldn't we say, because not everything on CNN may not feel true either. I think it's not, I mean, I don't want to pick on any network, but it's like, can't we say, who on Fox act interested? Like, who on Fox said that? Oh, you know, that's really interesting. I wonder, let me see if I could see if that's true. Or did you try to verify that was true? Because that sounds really not what I heard. Or, I mean, can you follow up with other questions even to start a conversation? And you can maybe even, I don't know, to get, sometimes what I've done is kind of even said, geez, you know, I know this one time on this other network that I was listening to, I had to check for myself to just maybe get them to critical think, to not always believe whoever tells you something or wherever you heard something, because we all come with a certain set of belief systems, whether they're religious or through a network or whatever. I don't think any of us, it hurts any of us maybe to have somebody say, I kind of like it if somebody says to me, where did you get that from? Because we maybe can all learn from that. But I don't know, is that kind of what you're thinking, or my?
Yeah, we'll continue on. We can talk more about this.
Okay.
So basically identify, clarify the confidence levels, identify and clarify their main reasons why they believe that's true. So Sean Hannity said it. That might be their main reason. They believe all of this because Sean Hannity said it, and that's the gospel. And I wonder, has there ever been anything that Sean Hannity has said that you didn't agree with?
Yeah.
I mean, and potentially there is something, maybe there's not, maybe they're dyed in the wool and they believe 100% of what somebody says. But again, if you've got somebody who's getting angry or being confrontational, great word, that may be, because we're building rapport early on, and then we're going to spend a little rapport when we ask these questions. So there's a balance there. We don't want to just platform somebody and let them just talk about what they believe and that's it, and just sit there. But we want to be knowledgeable enough about this on how to ask questions about the why and the how without picking on the what to get them to think. So it's really about just giving them the space to think through it. Yes.
Kevin, the premise though that you're working under is that the other party is open to having this discussion. I just read, and I'm sorry, I thought I saved the article, but there's a recent study done in the UK that said that those people who are of a particularly strong opinion acquired that opinion early on in that topic of discussion, that discussion topic.
Yep.
That anyone coming at them with the idea that I can encourage you to examine your position is very unlikely to succeed. That they've already made that conclusion.
Sure.
And any kind of contrary argument, all it does is solidify their position.
What if I'm not giving them an argument? I've sat in a room.
Oh no!
Let me give you one.
Your premise is I want to make you think, and that's.
I'm not telling them I want to make them think
No,
either.
but your questions are suggestive of
Yes.
there is a way of thinking about this, and maybe I can encourage you to think of it as this way or that way. Immediately, I think putting the recipient of that message in a position of defense.
Yep.
That now I have to defend what my
If you're
position is.
hearing that, then I'm doing it wrong, because I am really curious about what you believe and why you believe it. I have no motive to change your mind. I just want to understand where you're coming from. And I have sat in rooms with multiple people of the other side where during the conversation, we had an 1.5 hour long conversation, me and 3 people from the Republican side. Okay. They were talking about how having an electric fence on the border, and even if children walked up and touched the fence and they got electrocuted and died, that's the mother's responsibility who was trying to bring their children in. And it would be of no consequence to the United States, that we wouldn't be responsible at all. So we were at that point.
Did that answer surprise you?
It doesn't matter if it surprises me or not.
But did it?
No. But let me continue on that vein. So basically during that conversation, I repeated back. I said, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that if a mother brings her child and her child dies, that's the mother's responsibility. Is that what you're saying? That's what I think I'm hearing you say. Is that correct? And this person sat for a good 5-10 seconds and didn't really know what to say, because now their gears are going, I may be conflicting other issues with this without me saying anything. But at the end of that conversation, after an 1.5 hours, totally different outcome. the three people said we need to meet with more people that are Democrats. They said we need to put more people on the border to process people coming in to our country to work legally, because right now we're making our business owners criminals because they have nobody else they can hire to do their work, and we need lower priced food. And I didn't tell them any of that. I just asked questions about where they were standing on things, and they came to the conclusion themselves. It's the where we get into trouble is when we start to tell people you're wrong. How many times has somebody walked up to you and said you're wrong and that you've changed your mind? Right? That's the backfire effect on that. I mean, they've done studies on that where it's not 100% conclusive, but a lot of times that backfire effect happens where you strengthen, just like what you're saying, you're strengthening their resolve. If you do it and you're coming at it with an agenda and you're not really coming to it with curiosity and understanding, because I really want to understand where you're coming from.
But you also
and how you're
have
getting
to admit that your likelihood of having that kind of a conversation is with someone who is open to the idea that having the conversation is going to be worthwhile to them.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's
let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I only worked at the Sioux Empire Fair once, in front of the Democratic tent. The number of people that when they saw me approach the center of the pathway would avoid me so as not to have any kind of conversation, or were curious enough about why the hell am I approaching? Why are you coming at me? I distrust that. And because I distrust it, do you think that if I had hey, could you spare 5 minutes? I'd love to have a conversation with you. Oh, baby, you want to convince me of another fact I know is wrong.
Why would they think that? Because you stepped out of a Democratic booth walking toward
that's
them?
a possibility.
Right?
Of course,
I mean,
that's a
so
possibility.
you're coming at them with an agenda. Just by the act of being in that booth and walking
They
out.
assume that. I may not be coming at them with an agenda. I may be
Right.
coming to do the same thing that you're doing.
And is it good?
Inquire.
And is it good to assume?
You know, if someone told me at the beginning of a conversation that they put the blame for a child being electrocuted on the mother,
You'd walk
I
away.
guess, why would I want to invest an hour and a half in a conversation?
That was about
No, wait,
halfway
no,
through.
No, you're the one that brought
Yep.
this up.
Yep, that's good.
Number
Yeah.
one, I'm retired. I don't have that kind of time. And I find it surprising that you're employed and you have that kind of time.
Yep.
But maybe that makes you a better man. But I'm just saying, I wouldn't want to invest an hour and a half. And frankly, what they're saying is much more important than why they came to the conclusion in the first place.
The point is that at the end of it, they thought through it and they changed their own minds, and I didn't change it for them. Because we're not going to be able to change people's minds. We have to give them the space to do it themselves. That's really what this comes down to.
So can we go back to step one, establishing rapport? And
Yeah.
because then if they say they're not interested in having a conversation, then
Move on.
That's
Yeah.
the end. Yeah.
That's the end, right?
And so in these situations, if they're not interested in talking, then
And you don't start with, I want to talk about Trump. You're sitting and you're having a conversation. And if somebody brings something up, that's interesting. That's where you want to go and get consent. Hey, do you mind if I'm really curious about that. Is that something you're okay exploring with me? Because I really want to know. So, yes.
It occurs to me that whoever is leading this, whether it's you or anybody else, has to have a certain amount of sensitivity and being able to read other people fairly well, because it's almost impossible, I think, for people who have a fixed opinion about something to be able to even establish rapport with others.
Right.
So I think you've got some skill that probably not all of us have.
And this is what I'm saying. this is what we're trying to teach, is this skill. How do we, so the modules that are being created for the training, I think there's 17 modules total, and we're getting about done with the first 7 are getting ready to be published. They'll be freely available for people to go through to learn the concepts. We have training areas where people can go in and sit down and have conversations and practice this. Because this is not something that you're just going to walk here and take this list and go out and start having conversations.
Okay, so
It's just-
I
that's-
didn't realize there was training.
Yeah. So this is,
And do you ever tell people you're just not right for this? Or?
well, people, I mean, ideally, right? People have to want to, you have to want to understand other people. You have to want to have better conversations.
And to listen to them.
You have to be able to listen. And if we're sitting here going, we are not going to make any progress because I'm right and you're wrong, we're not going to make any progress.
Yeah, but an electrocuted child, isn't there some inherently, how do you come to a middle position on, well, maybe it would be good if they were just electrocuted to be paralyzed.
So you missed the part. You missed the part where the outcome of that conversation wasn't electrocuting children. The outcome of that conversation was, we need to get more people on the border processing these people so they can come in legally. That is what you're missing, and you're focusing on the thing that is to demonize them.
Well, even it sounded like at the end of the day, they started to reconsider their position because allowing maybe the woman and the child in could bring more profits for their damn businesses.
So would you rather have dead children or have people
Exploited
coming into our,
exploited immigrants.
well, there you go.
Can I just say one?
Yeah.
I understand where you're coming from, Jim, but it's like, if it feels like some of the things that happen in a heated conversation go too far and we get too emotional. We've all done it.
Right.
However, I'm wondering if in the society we have now, it's so scary. We're afraid to go into the wrong car. I mean, right? A lot of crazy things have happened. If we don't at least try to do something, it feels like
Right. And that's my point is
we gotta try.
I'm tired of sitting and not doing anything. We have to do
And being afraid.
something. And if we can start having conversations with people again, I mean, how many people, and probably this crowd, since we're a little bit older crowd, we probably talk to our neighbors and stuff more.
Not anymore.
Right? I mean, but that's where we're really getting to. We're getting to a point where people are sitting in their houses. They're not talking to anybody. They're closing off. They're focusing on one thing that is bad about somebody else. And that's all they're focusing on. We need to get back to community too.
Yeah.
And being able to sit and talk to people.
Never happened.
So, and that's where when we say it'll never happen, I have to say to myself that I'm going to do whatever I can to make it happen.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to I don't want my children living in a world like this. And it's not going to come from the top down. It's got to come from the bottom up. And I knew this was going to be a good, vigorous crowd because it always is. But I appreciate it though. Really, I
How
do.
soon will the modules be?
We're hoping by this fall. I think
Before
we've
the
got-
election that can roll out and then we can all learn a little bit maybe?
Right. And I know that I've had a couple people who have ran for office who we actually went through training without any official training before I was actually part of the board. Went through and kind of made up our own training, and that helped them immensely when they're out doing canvassing. So I hear that regularly from the two that were in there, how helpful or beneficial it was to be able to use just pieces of these techniques when they're door knocking, and what questions to ask to get people to think before they walk away.
Would you send out information to us to
Yeah.
like
And that business card that's
on
there,
the card?
there's a QR code on the back, and that'll take you to Street Epistemology International or streetepistemology.com. And you'll see information about our courses that are coming out. You can be part of that courseware and help us do testing and training on that. And there's other ways you can help out too, and other assets there that you can download and learn. So, yes.
Two comments. First, thank you, Kevin. I mean, it's just a way for us to open our own minds and communicate better. And, we can learn little tidbits, and we all need to keep an open mind.
Even from each other.
Yes.
We think we know that we believe in the same thing, but how we get there is different sometimes.
Yes.
And it's just good to know each other. So, thank you for listening. I hope I didn't bore you too much.
No.
All right.
Kevin is here every week, almost. So you can talk to him then. If anybody wants to stay around for an hour and a half and have a conversation with him,
Yes.
go ahead and
Yeah.
grab a table.
Actually, if somebody has anything that they want to explore, that would be great. I'd love to sit. If it's something that even if it's something you're thinking about that I'm not sure how I should think about this, this technique is great to just go through and help think through things. So, and it doesn't have to be political. It can be whatever in your life. So, right.
So anyway, thanks for coming. And
I'm just saying,
you got one thing?
My second comment, we found out that